Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. What happened in the last couple of days in the National Assembly has been debated back and forth, of course, but it's something that cannot be said enough. Whatever has happened, the way the books have been thrown around, the way that the members of this honorable National Assembly abused each other, the way they talked at each other is something that was there for everyone to see from all over the country, even internationally. Certainly it's something that's reprehensible. It's something that everyone would have liked not to have happened. But the most important thing is that what should have happened instead of all the debacle that happened was probably a debate, a healthy debate between the opposition and the government. The opposition picking up on the budget, actually bringing about the points that needed to be looked at, whether they were actually going to be of some benefit to the people. All of that needed to be debated in the parliament. That's what happened. The ruckus that ensued is there for all to see. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the ramifications of a National Assembly that potentially has members that indulge in this behavior. Post this debacle, we saw certain statements coming from certain leaders of the opposition. We saw from members of the opposition saying statements that this is a tradition. Things like that were said back and forth, again debated on national television. Where are we headed? If today we are sitting here talking about what our National Assembly members do, why they come in, who votes them in, why are they voted, the purpose behind their coming to the National Assembly, all of that perhaps may have been said time and again, but still needs to be looked at. As a country, as a National Assembly members, what 3-something members, I don't want to make a mistake, out of all this population come and do this. And where the blame is due, whether 1, 2, 3, a couple, even one side of the benches can be blamed at all. All of that today, we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the Sindh, the kind of the rivalry, if for the lack of a better word, that is happening as far as Sindh province is concerned, between the government and the Sindh government. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Ahmed Jawad, who's Central Secretary Information, PTI. Thank you for joining us today. Senator Dr. Afnanullah Khan, Leader PMLN. Thank you for being with us. Javed Rana, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us. Ji Jawad Sahab, I know that this has been debated in the last couple of days, but I still would like to know what you think, why you think things happened the way they did in the National Assembly, and do you think it's fair to relegate the blame completely to the other side of the benches?
Mahrukh, there are multiple aspects to this whole episode. First of all, I think no sane person in the country would appreciate this kind of incident, whether it is media or it is opposition, it is civil society, it is government representatives. So this cannot be justified, and nobody should. We just also heard Speaker National Assembly Asad Kaisar when he said that it's an unfortunate incident, and he did not put blame on any one party, and he generally called it an unfortunate incident. And he made a committee which should investigate what actually happened, who are responsible, and half of the members were supposed to come from the opposition party, but I think so far what I have heard, they did not accept this participation into this committee, so that the investigation may not proceed further. The second aspect, Mahrukh, we should also keep it in mind that such kind of incidents we have seen in very civilized country like Japan, we have seen it in Italy, we have seen it in India, in South American countries, so many countries. So sometimes the heated debates, they get out of hands, and we see such odd incidents, but at the end of the day, once we are analyzing in retrospect, we have to condemn it. And the second thing is that we need to make up, I would say, some kind of policy which government and opposition, and I think most of the heated debates they have generated when the top leadership of one party has been ridiculed by the other. And that is something that
is that what happened?
Not in this, but most of the time the ridiculing the top leadership has resulted into very heated debates. So there is some kind of protocol or reforms can be introduced where this can be avoided. And on the other hand, the matter should be investigated, and I think opposition should participate in that, so that something can be concluded. We have some conclusions, like Ali Awan, he apologized on this thing, and he said that I would not like my family members to see it, and I would never repeat it. So he was apologetic and he was regretful. At the same time, we also heard Waheed Aswar when he said that this is a kind of culture in Punjab. So I mean, these are also kind of conclusions flowing out of this incident in the post-incident scenario.
Right, let me come back to you. Ji, Senator Saab, you think that, from the opposition, you think that any, like Javed Saab is saying, of course, Waheed Aswar Saab's statement has been flouted, and there is what's your opinion on it?
I mean, my opinion on that is I don't agree with that particular statement. I mean, I do respect him a lot. He is a very senior member of our party. But I do not agree with what he said, because I have a lot of relatives who are Punjabi, and I have not seen this kind of language or abusive slur being used by any of them. So I don't think that it is part of the culture. Maybe some people do it, but I don't think it is part of the culture.
But you think it's part of the culture of the National Assembly? That itself has its own decorum, that should itself have a certain decorum, a certain sanctity associated with it.
I mean, I think even if there is an uncivilized person, when he goes to the Senate or the National Assembly, he should behave in a civilized manner. If they don't do it, then it is unfortunate. I mean, I saw Syed getting on top of a table and start throwing the books around of the budget. So, I mean, that is very unfortunate what has happened, and it was in a way historic as well, because we have seen these kind of fights happen. When
this happens, that's what I want to come to. This has happened before in the National.
That's what I was saying. This has never happened that the government has actually started throwing the books on the opposition leader. I mean, it has happened the other way around, has happened, but never. The government doesn't protest. I mean, when their own budget is being presented. So it was very unfortunate that that they were throwing the books of the budget to the opposition members, and we've seen the video who started it. So it was unfortunate, and the reason I would say that is, if we wanted to start that, then we wouldn't have done it when Shahbaz Sharif was speaking. We would have done it when Imran Khan was speaking, or maybe Shaukat Tareen when he was speaking. We would have done that, but we didn't do it. So I think
you're saying that the opposition just retaliated.
We did retaliate it, and everyone has a threshold. I mean, you can't start abusing someone and then don't expect a response from that particular person. So I do condemn the whole situation, because it reflects very poorly on behalf of Pakistan, because it goes all over the world and people see it and they think of us as being uncivilized. But I think the prime responsibility of this event goes to the Prime Minister, because he is the leader of the House, and it has happened under his leadership. So I believe that it is a lack of leadership skills that has enabled the whole situation to the point where it has come.
I'll go to Javed Saab later. I'll let him answer that. But first, Javed Saab, what do you think? Javed Saab, regardless of who started it, regardless of whether the opposition was retaliating or participating, I think eventually it resulted in a participation. I don't think there are two opinions about that, whether they started retaliating or not. How do you see things today?
I think it goes much beyond purely reflecting the state of affairs that we have been having in our parliament. Unfortunately, since these kind of incidents did not happen for the first time, and similar incidents have been happening elsewhere in the world, but we have to see it in a with a different angle. This is a country where military had repeated takeovers, and then the elected governments were sent packing by the elected president, and also unfortunately in the military takeovers. One of the allegations has been that this is the parliament which includes the kind of the people who don't deserve to represent the people of Pakistan. And when our parliament would descend itself to a level, then that means you are, over the period of time, in the long run, giving justification to the undemocratic forces to play havoc with the democracy. So I think it is the high time the parliamentarian must think over it. It must start from the Prime Minister of Pakistan himself.
Do you think things are worse today in terms of, the decorum of the National Assembly, tolerance between political parties than they were, let's say, 5-10 years ago?
I would say partly Prime Minister himself is responsible, because since he came into power, unfortunately, a kind of the culture of foul language that has come into Pakistan in our parliament, in the parliament. It was there before, but not to this extent. And then I think the opposition parties, more particularly the PMLN, they've been, again, even this debate is going on about what happened in the parliament. Still they are recalling what happened with them in 2018. I think the PTI can also recall of what happened with them in 2013. So all these parties are involved in getting all kinds of concessions through.
But
the point I'm trying to make.
Senator Afnan and you may say that the Prime Minister is to blame. But the point
I'm not saying the Prime Minister is to blame. I'm coming to the other side of the picture.
But I'm just saying that these are the very people who've been there, minus one, two, three, who've always been there in the National Assembly.
I'm coming to that side. Exactly that is the point I'm going to make. Now Shah Khan Abbasi is the former Prime Minister. He's himself saying that this would poorly reflect and undemocratic forces would benefit from that. Point is, why did opposition try to block the proceeding physically? This does not abode well.
Some are saying it happened, it started from the government.
They can say it, but I think essentially the opposition since has already vowed that it would not allow the passage of the budget. They have other tools to stop it. They need to prevail upon the members of the parliament not to pass it. I think opposition has equally responsibility, because they know the system better than the PTI. They've been part and parcel of the same system. If PTI has benefited from the electoral manipulations, then PMLN was the biggest beneficiary in the history of Pakistan. So even now, when this debate is going on, they are making the same point that the PTI, since the beneficiary of the electoral fraud, so they don't know how to behave. Okay, but the opposition should know how to behave. They have far more experience. You can blame PTI. Yes, they are the new in the party.
My question is, are they new in your opinion? Isn't it true that most of the PTI, if we look at PTI as a political party, I'm sure if not all, I think Jawad Sahab can correct me if I'm wrong, most of it would probably be comprising of people who have been in parliament before in one party or the other.
Since unfortunately the power politics is as such, I don't think the opposition is concerned about the budget. They are concerned about settling the score with the PTI.
But how is it settling the score?
And I think both sides have made up their mind that there is it seems that there is a possible scenario of physical clashes, and they were prepared for that. And very important point.
That's what I want to come to. I think that's very important.
And I think one of the minority members, not the members of parliament, but somewhere else, and they have raised a very particular point, very important point. They are saying that this is a parliament which discussed about the blasphemy issue. And then there have been unfortunately fair and unfair cases on this kind of issue. And what happened? That both MPs from the both sides, they are throwing the books carrying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and carrying the name of the last Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, theoretically speaking, I mean, similar prosecution can also happen against them. When you talk of prosecuting a minority on similar charges, so I think they are also vulnerable. And that shows that I think there is no rational mindset, and they don't know the consequences of their actions. And the action, let me tell you here, at the end of the day, people feel very, very upset with what happened in the parliament.
Yeah,
Because they are there for the legislation. It seems they are there for the wrestling.
Ji, Jawad sir.
I may not agree with many of the comments by my brother. First of all, I mean, there is no benchmark that there is a new parliamentarian and there is an old parliamentarian. I mean, the conversation, civilized conversation, whether it is in the parliament, whether it is in a talk show, whether it is on social media, I mean, it requires a person some basic training, that once he reaches to such kind of forums, he should be able to demonstrate according to a civilized way. So I mean, this is this discussion is perhaps not meaningful if you say that PTI parliamentarians are new or old. Okay. Now,
don't you think, just to interject, don't you think we're progressing from having brawls on TV to having brawls in the National Assembly now?
I think, Mahrukh, what I would take this incident as, when somebody points out exclusively making Prime Minister responsible. So I would like to give you a retrospect analysis of political aggression and political intolerance, which started in the 70s and it reached to its peak during the 90s. And it's not just the Parliament. I mean, Supreme Court was attacked, and so would we refer exclusively to the top leadership of PMLN at that time, or when Benazir Bhutto was taking oath, and there was similar kind of brawl in the parliament, and at that time there was no PTI. So I don't know.
So these were the same people.
This political aggression. Please allow me to complete, and then you can. So this political aggression and this political intolerance, it is, I would say, over the decades. And let me also draw your attention. It is not just a political intolerance, it is a social intolerance. And in Parliament and in provincial assemblies, there may be 1,000 people representing different parties. In the TV talk shows, there may be a few hundred people participating and talking about, but there are 100 million people 24/7 talking about different issues on social media, crossing every limit. The limits which you have seen in the parliament, perhaps more than that. Just you may not be able to see the physical interaction because the people are remotely, but if you make them sit together, perhaps it could be worse.
Right.
So we need to understand. So before we exclusively refer the responsibility to one person or one political party, we need to understand the mindset and the training and the grooming of the society over the decades, and who are responsible for that grooming and training. Obviously those who have been ruling this country for the last 50 years, obviously they have created a culture, a political culture or a social culture, which we are reaping the fruit of that. I would say, as you sow, so shall you reap. So that's the kind of situation in the parliament.
My point when I said, and I think Javed Sahab also, the point is that these are the same people. Whether, you know, we cannot really blame, today we say the Prime Minister is to blame, or like Javed Sahab is saying, Jawad Sahab is saying, he raises a fair point when he says that, you know, under the leadership of other leaders, like for example PMLN or the PPP, when Benazir Bhutto was alive, there has been this similar kind of ruckus. Perhaps it's exceeded now in its severity, but it's definitely been there. So how have things changed?
I think the things have changed for the worst, and for sure the rise of Imran Khan in Pakistani political scene has enabled this culture of mudslinging and abusive slur, and that has been encouraged by Imran Khan Sahab himself. And that has actually enabled, I mean, Imran Khan was not there, I mean, he was there in the 90s, but certainly was not there in the 70s and the 80s. But we have seen the Charter of Democracy coming through, and after the signing of Charter of Democracy, there was a more, civilized mechanism of bipartisan policy making and legislation. And that was something that PTI made fun of. I mean, we managed to do the 18th Amendment, and we managed to do a lot of work by going across party lines.
Do you think there's a chance there can be that kind of charter of, if not democracy, some kind of charter? We've been talking about an economic charter. We've been talking about, a kind of good relationship between the opposition and the government.
I think it doesn't suit politically to Imran Khan that he develops charter with us and behaves in a civilized way.
But does it suit you? Does it suit the opposition?
I mean, for us it's very good because things like those on TV doesn't bode well for anyone. And
you are not taking responsibility as a party. You're not taking responsibility for what happened at all.
I mean,
I will not. The government saying it.
I will not. No, I will take responsibility if we were the one who started it. We knew, even I was in the parliamentary board meeting, and we knew before time that this was going to happen because we knew that PTI was making plans to basically stop the speech of Shahbaz Sharif Saab. So and the way they stopped it was by throwing the books at him, and then he has to go. So I can't take responsibility of PTI throwing books at us. And the fact remains that you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you are the leader of the house, you have to show courage. You have to show patience. If you don't have those things, then these things will keep happening again and again.
What did the government have to gain by doing this? They've already given the budget. They've already also knew they were going to get it passed through. There was what was to be achieved?
There was a slogan that Imran Khan didn't like when he came in the parliament. And that basically, from what we have heard, that was the reason why he gave direct instructions even to the ministers. I mean, look at Murad Saidi was on top of a desk and throwing books at us. I mean, can you imagine someone doing that kind of? I mean, he's a federal minister for communications. Imagine him doing that.
There were also other ministers.
But nobody got it on the table.
I think since the opposition attempted to block the proceeding, the very budget session, and a lot of hue and cry, and the PTI just tried to settle the scores, and things went out of hand, and then unfortunately
you don't think there was any such plan which...
I think plan was there to the extent to respond back, because since there was determination on the both sides. One side was determined that they would not allow the passage of the bill, and they have to create a situation inside the parliament where the government feels very uncomfortable, and they managed to do that. And then the PTI retaliated disproportionately, perhaps, and then on the both sides, unfortunately, there are sizable number of immature MPs and who use very foul language. And I also here would point out what former Prime Minister Shahid Khan Abbasi said just a few weeks ago about the Speaker of the National Assembly. You see, he has been the former Prime Minister. He has been a member of the Parliament for so many times. I think he should have acted with decency.
So, do you think this happens because really for these members there's really no repercussions? They know that nothing will come out of it. Even if there is a suspension, we saw that 6 or 7 names have been identified.
There would not be repercussion for these MPs individually, but there would be a repercussion for the system, for the democracy.
Yes.
And there would be repercussion where, the very respect of the members of the parliament, the very respect of the parliament as institution has already been, degraded. The manner with which people talk about the parliament. During the previous government, I used to hear many MPs that they are going to prosecute people while they are talking against the parliament. The point is,
the way that people talk about politicians generally also.
Yes, at the end of the day, the public perception would develop to a point where they would not like to listen to the names of the politicians, and then the powers that be, they can send this entire system packing. Look, we have to do everything show with our conduct. It is the moral order with which you can rule. It is not going to be the legislative order. It is not the constitutional mandate. And the constitution and the laws, they are made out of the collective morality of the people of Pakistan, or anywhere else. When the very base of the law and the constitution, the morality, is destroyed, then just wait for those days when the constitution and the law would also be breached.
Javed, do you think it's also about, I'll just come to you, do you think it's about trying to please your masters also?
This is a very, very unfortunate aspect, and you have very precisely pointed that out. And on the both sides of the divide.
Right.
Whenever anyone talk against the leadership of the other party, but then there is a competition among the MPs to defend their leaders.
Who's more loyal?
Who's a more loyal? And that loyalty is registered no matter in what manner that loyalty is demonstrated. Their morality does not matter. Unfortunately, our moral principles that is just meant for the public consumption. But when it comes to the very character demonstrating it, people descend themselves to a very low level.
Right.
And when they talk, use the street language, then, I mean, what impression are you creating? I mean,
you were going to say
I was just going to say that he's right, that the collective morality of the people of Pakistan is reflected in the parliament, and the thing that is that there might be a conspiracy against democracy, and there has always been a conspiracy against democracy in this country. But I think most of the people who initiated it or who were responsible for it got elected in the 2018 election, which was widely rigged in favor of PTI. So and to expect you're right, they must be pleasing their masters, but their masters might not be the ones they are thinking of. They might be somebody else, and those people might be doing it so that they can basically make people of Pakistan think that all politicians are bad or the whole democratic system is bad. So that might be another thing that we have to be concerned about.
That's a lot of conspiracy.
I think we are jumping to the conclusions. In this case, their immediate masters are the top political leadership.
Don't you think it's just the case of exposing themselves?
And it is the parliamentarians themselves to begin with who are hatching conspiracy and against themselves. You see, when you by your conduct don't show the decency and morality, then others will jump.
But there is no, I mean, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that there is no decency or morality on TV every day? You know, we see brawls happening. We've seen that recently. That some of which have recently resulted in physical violence. So it's not only, it's just that now it's moved to the National Assembly also, but it's happening by politicians.
I think this is what Mahrukh, when I started explaining this subject, was that it is not just 1,000 parliamentarians in federal and provincial assemblies. We see it in the talk shows where maybe few hundred or 1,000 people by politicians, but you should also be able to identify a few anchor persons who create this situation, and then they watch it like a spectator to have the rating of their program, and I think people know about their names. So this culture is collectively made, fabricated in our society. So again, I would like to say that exclusively referring it to Imran Khan, Prime Minister Imran Khan, is not fair, because in the past we have seen the political intolerance and aggression when Nawaz Sharif was the Chief Minister in Punjab and Benazir was Prime Minister, and we have seen the worst of the tussle at that time also, and it was not on the behest of Imran Khan.
It seems to be across the
board. Please,
since they have repeated it, just one line. I referred the foul language and some of the inappropriate words which have been trickled on from top to the bottom, and then one of the PTI member, Ali Nawaz, the kind of the language that he used. So what I'm trying to say is that the kind of the language that has been introduced during last couple of years, that was unprecedented in our political culture, but he is right to the extent when it comes to the physical attacks, then the PMLN, unfortunately.
I think worst of the political culture we have seen when Supreme Court was attacked.
I think
so. Worst of the political culture we have seen when a helicopter was dropping pamphlets of indecent picture of the top leadership of the opposite political party. So perhaps that may not be worst for you, but it is worst for me.
But
So we have seen the worst of the political culture in the past by the two political parties. So let's not jump to the conclusion today that you have seen one incident in the parliament which is collectively, the responsibility can be shared. That is why the speaker said that there should be an investigation, so we can really identify
Do you think it
how
is
it
enough
started.
that
You
the
don't need to
investigation
identify
happens?
them, you can see the...
There are injuries. I mean, there are injuries this time round. People have actually gotten hurt also. So, I mean, we can't say that things are not getting worse from time to time and from as time moves on. And it's not one political party across the board. We've seen all political parties.
I think it is unfair when you say it is across the board, because when you're trying to basically say that nobody is basically responsible, when you say everybody is responsible. So I'm just trying to say that, and what the comment made by my friend is about the pictures from the helicopter was done by Sheikh Rashid and other people that I don't want to nominate here on TV because people will get into trouble.
What about the budget? Do you think that the opposition didn't have credible critique, that they had to, resort to this kind of...
I'm telling you that why would we do it when our own leader is standing there and giving a speech? We would have done it when somebody else was standing, most probably Imran Khan or Shaukat Tareen was there. But we wouldn't do it when Shahbaz Sharif was himself delivering a speech. So I think our content was good, and that was one of the reasons why they didn't want us to finish the speech for about like 3 days that went on back and forth. As far as the content is concerned about the budget, I mean, there is huge issues. I mean, for instance, the fiscal deficit is pretty much out of control. We see a deficit about 4 trillion rupees. The estimates made by the government are unrealistic, especially with regards to the tax collection.
But don't you think what happened has changed the narrative of what should be debated on national television? I mean, whether we like it or not, it's news. It's international news, it's national news, whatever happened. So, rather than debating the good, the bad of the budget itself, we are talking about what happened. So that itself has changed the narrative of the debate on national television. For a while, it will have changed.
No, that is true. The headlines carried the news, and it went all over the world. And I have said that I condemn the whole situation, and I don't think that the government can basically just say that we are not responsible because something happened 50 years ago.
Do you think it's possible for the government and the opposition to sit together
and
work towards a charter, a decorum of sorts that can exist within the parliament at least?
We have given an offer to the government many years ago about a charter of economy where we can work together, but the unserious and childish behavior of the people who are at the helms of power has basically enabled this whole thing to fall apart. I mean, we have approached the government many times that we want to work, and every time we have tried to work on some legislation, they always come back and say they are asking for an NRO. So this is the kind of behavior that we've seen for many years now, or almost like 3 years now. So there's very little we can do. I mean, you can't do much if someone is trying to abuse you and lie about whatever is going on in that meeting. So there's very little we can do. I mean,
Javed, do you think nothing will happen? Because we are seeing, unfortunately, both the government, at least the representatives that we have here, representatives from the government and the opposition, say that there seems to be, it's almost impossible for the government and the opposition to sit together and perhaps work on some kind of rules of conduct. There are, of course, rules of procedure, conduct, business in National Assembly, lots of rules here that I can mention, but nothing has been observed.
So, I think they need to basically restore the decency, some decorum in the parliament.
Do you think they can? It doesn't seem like
they can do it, and probably the opposition leader Shahbaz Sharif perhaps had some desire to create a situation also partially, I would say, that whereby he can demonstrate that he is not all the time is a dove. He can also show some sort of an aggression in his conduct. That unfortunately was.
But Senator Saab is saying it was during the speech of.
But again, I think it is opposition which actually began everything. They disrupted the speech of the finance minister. And
That is a norm.
and when they disrupted the speech of the finance minister, then there had to be a retaliation. Unfortunately, it should not have happened, but PTI was prepared to settle the scores, and they did not allow Shehbaz Sharif's speech to happen because previously the finance minister's speech was disrupted. So again, it's a tit for tat. They are not conducting a serious business, and I would say that here a very important point is that opposition should act in decency, because if the system is harmed, everybody is going to lose. People of Pakistan are going to lose. They should not allow.
There doesn't seem to be any threat of the system being derailed at this point. The way
not really. But again, you are setting a precedent. You are creating because the MPs are degrading themselves. That means they are degrading the parliament. That means they are degrading the democracy. That does not abode well for the system in the long run. You know, these are the baby things which.
Unfortunately, these are all considerations that seem to be of little importance to all of the members of all political parties.
They have not learned lesson from their own history. This is very unfortunate. In this parliament, unfortunately, physical clashes also happen. And I remember perhaps one of the PMLN member, he was beaten black and blue by the People's Party in early 90s, and he later on.
But they're saying that then the Charter of Democracy came in, so perhaps things moved on from there. And now
none of these parties actually implemented that Charter of Democracy. I think they need now a Charter of Decency. That decency is not there. They need to behave like member of the parliament. I mean, they're supposed to legislate. They are not to act in a very irrational manner. You see, these are not an ordinary scene, and we should not justify it by saying that this has been happening elsewhere in the world.
I don't think it's being taken as significantly, as importantly as it should be by any of the political parties.
It has not. You will see that within the next couple of weeks, maybe in few days, these members would be reinstated by the speakers. And the only punishment that they had, that they were deprived to enter into the parliament for a couple of days. And that is going to be the maximum punishment. I think there is unfortunately, whatever happening inside the parliament, you cannot prosecute anyone. So at the end of the day, it's going to be the responsibility of the Speaker of the National Assembly. And I would say that both parties should join their hands together, and they must punish all those rowdy MPs who created that situation, and particularly those who use foul language.
Jawad sir, do you think something will happen, rationally speaking? In your, do you see this incident actually resulting in something, perhaps for the betterment of